the two important topics for this term should be market failure and labor market. तो उसके अलावा we'll see as we go along the year और कौन से important हो सकते हैं. I feel these are good independent chapters. Um, any problem anyone had specifically in the theory wala side? So do let me know. Basically, this is what happens when we're dealing with market failure. This is obviously talking about when markets are failing. When we're talking about markets, we're obviously talking about a place where consumers and producers meet. It does not have to be a physical place where people meet, but it is basically हम diagram के अंदर we show it through the demand and the supply, where the consumers and the producers show their preference regarding certain goods, and the market comes up with an efficient price and an efficient quantity. This was our basic idea of a market. Basically, market हम free market से derive कर रहे हैं term को, और free market में we know that demand and the supply decides the best optimum level of quantity and price. If the prices are below or above, obviously the demand and the supply will not meet. Or if the quantity is not at QO, and if it's lower than QO or above QO, obviously then again the prices are not meeting. तो जब हम market failure की बात करते हैं, तो there are two directions for this particular topic. One direction is dealing with the market structure का topic, which talks about perfect competition, monopoly, oligopolies, and all of those. Okay. And the other side of market failure is talking about all those other failures that we've done, AS के अंदर, that how merit goods are underproduced and demerit goods are overproduced. And whenever we produce certain goods and services, it creates pollution, it creates externalities, right? So I know in the lectures there were certain discussions about these externalities, and even in fact public goods के बारे में भी there are certain discussions कि ये सारे आपका market failure है because the market fails to provide certain social welfare level of quantity which is required. Uh, आज का जो question होगा, that is where it is mostly going to focus on about these failures, not from the market structures point of view, but these things right here. So let me walk you through a few things before we go into the essays for the next few classes. Mainly, जो डिस्कशन है वो है चार डायग्राम्स के अंदर. तो हम कोशिश करेंगे अपनी टर्मिनोलॉजीज को, आई एम श्योर के लेक्चर्स के अंदर और मेरी अभी की बात के अंदर there might be some differences. Now, there were ways in which we've been teaching this, lekin every now and then there are revisions in the new course books or something or the other, which basically brings an upgrade to the knowledge. So I'll just update you on that. बेसिक लेक्चर्स जो तुम लोगों ने किए हैं उसमें जो डिस्कशन है वो ये है. दिस इज आवर डायग्राम. What is this diagram telling us? This diagram is showing sorry. Yeah. So what this diagram is showing us is you have private benefit, people who are paying and getting this good consumption. Like for example, let's say it's vaccinations. Okay, vaccination is basically part of healthcare, and we've all gotten those COVID vaccines recently. So healthcare के अंदर, obviously, when we're talking about these goods, we call them merit goods. Now, this we know from AS level, but we never did the diagram in AS. So this is your first time introduction to the diagrams. Basically, in order to get the first jab, like let's imagine if in Pakistan COVID vaccine had been introduced during the COVID time when we had like lockdowns and all, and the government said if you don't get these vaccinations, you can't go to the mall, you can't get the same, you can't go to the bank, you can't get air travel, all of those, right? So clearly, to get your first jab, definitely people must be willing to pay much higher price for it because they see a lot of benefit in it. Because, you're going to get immune to it, number one, and you will get all these accessibilities. तो पहले के लिए if you had to pay the price, okay, because ये free market होता तो गवर्नमेंट नहीं होती और गवर्नमेंट नहीं होती तो फ्री में वैक्सीनेशंस नहीं मिलती तो everyone would have had to pay for it. So for the first vaccination, people would be willing to pay a much higher price. And then after that, sometimes you had to get another one. People would be willing to pay a lesser price for the second jab because they would assume that the first one would do reasonable amount of job and the second one is a precautionary, so they would place a lower value on it. And उसके बाद और मजीद अगर आपको लगानी होती for traveling purposes and all, just for precaution, people would place lower value, but the highest value would be placed on the very first one. Okay? This shows marginal private benefit. Private का मतलब क्या होता है? That people are paying for it and consuming it and getting the benefit out of it. That they're not going to get COVID vaccination and they're going to remain healthy or whatever. फिर दूसरे एंड के ऊपर from the firm's point of view, the more COVID vaccinations they're going to provide, the more, you know, uh, costs that they will have to incur in order to make more. थोड़ा सा यहाँ पे problem होगी, but just go with the idea because usually जब आप COVID vaccination पहली बनाते हैं, तो there's a lot of money that gets involved, right? So you have a very high fixed cost that goes in. फिर क्या होता है फिर each and extra vaccination that you're going to produce, you're going to need those vials, you're going to need more um, raw material, different sorts of chemicals, and you have to arrange those depending on how many million vaccinations you have to produce. So the idea here is the more vaccination they need to produce, the more factor of production they will have to acquire from different countries and different places. Now, just imagine that the companies who have done the research and they have figured out a formula, and pretty much all formulas should be very similar, जो, आपका different companies would have come up with, जिसमें Chinese भी हैं, and you have the Americans and all of those. So they will all be fighting for those scarce, limited, uh, COVID vaccination ke raw materials, the Chinese and the Americans and maybe the Australians and the Canadians and the British, all pharmaceuticals are fighting. And just remember that the whole global supply chain is sort of like constricted. Ships are not flowing, raw material are short. So they're all fighting for those limited raw material. To provide more and more vaccination, the cost will tend to go up. When we're talking about private costs, we're talking about actually those vaccinations that are involved, raw material which are involved in order to produce. So, based on this, people's ability to pay and benefit, and firms' ability to pay for the cost of raw material, marginal private cost, and the market decides, okay, fine, we're going to make about this many million. Let's give it a number. So my number is based on global population. We have 8 billion ki population, but let's say we the world says that about you know, let's be conservative, and 3 billion vaccinations we should produce. Okay? And the price that people are willing to pay is whatever amount of dollars, let's say, $20 per jab or something. And let's produce 3 billion vaccination globally. These are the people who are paying for it, and these are the firms which are basically paying for it. Now, this is what's going to happen. Government realizes that, you know what, these companies are only looking at the benefits that people who are getting the vaccinations and they're not going to get sick. But these companies are not looking at the fact that the more number of people getting the vaccination will sort of stop the whole contagious aspect. And overall, it's not only कि एक फैमिली में अगर 10 लोग हैं, 3 people अगर jabs लगा लेते हैं, so there are 7 people who are still, at large and can get into trouble. But if we're somehow able to increase the number to like 6 or 7, then only 3 people are left. Those 3 people will be much more secure, right, if the number increase. So from that point of view, the government actually feels that the social welfare quantity, अगर हमने globally कोविड को टैकल करना है, तो अगर दुनिया में 8 बिलियन लोग हैं, तो अगर हम 6 बिलियन लोगों को किसी तरह से cater कर लें, तो the world can actually be safe. What they're actually looking at is that the social benefit, जब आप ओवरऑल सोसाइटी को देखते हैं तो उसमें इट्स पीपल हु कैन नॉट अफोर्ड ऑल्सो, $20 even to get the vaccination. So they're risking their lives, but the government feels that actually the social benefit is much greater. Okay. So if the social benefit is on a higher side, 6 billion is what we should be producing. But the market feels that, you know what, only 3 billion we can get paid for. So there is a market failure. So certain steps को please याद रखने की कोशिश करो. Market failure identify करना है तो you're always going to look at QM, where the market is producing. Market is producing at 3 billion vaccinations. The social benefit is much more higher from the society's point of view. अभी जब मैं ऐसे करूंगा तो you'll come across these terms. The marginal social benefit is much higher, which government feels is where we should be looking at things. But the marginal social cost is much lower. Now, if you notice, मैंने marginal social cost कहीं भी नहीं लिखी हुई. Marginal social cost is actually over here in our assumption. And I think in my lectures, I explained why is this so. So our assumption is that when we're making vaccinations, we're not harming the society in any way in terms of pollution, whether it's air, water, um, you know, smoke related, noise related. There's no pollution in production side. तो उसकी वजह से the social cost is much lesser and the social benefit is much more on the higher. So the market is actually failing. And the market is failing to recognize something called an external benefit. Those people, those 3 family members or the 6 family members who are not getting the treatment, these are those family members who are not paying and getting the jabs, but relying on, duas and all. तो अब ये मार्केट का फेलियर हो गया है इधर. In order to correct these market failures, we say okay, we need to increase the quantity. Up until we increase the quantity, this shaded region basically represents the market failure. I hope there's no problem in this because lecture ke andar, this is what we have dealt with. Um, MP basically represents marginal private benefit. Okay, marginal simply means that एक और बिलियन वैक्सीनेशन अगर हम बनाते हैं. इकोनॉमिक्स के अंदर हम एएस और ओ लेवल्स में कहते हैं डिसीजंस आर मेड ऑन मार्जिनल्स. एक और डैम बनाना चाहिए कि नहीं बनाना चाहिए, एक और स्कूल बनाना चाहिए कि नहीं बनाना चाहिए. सिमिलरली यहां पर भी इफ मार्केट इज प्रोड्यूसिंग 3 बिलियन, तो क्या हमें 4 पे जाना चाहिए कि नहीं, 5 पे जाना है कि नहीं, 6 पे जाना है कि नहीं. तो marginal is about one extra का decision. Now, and it can be as simple as when we go to a restaurant and we order ourselves a burger, and a price we're paying is, let's suppose, 1,000 rupees for a burger. So your marginal private cost is 1,000 rupees. Private cost, you're paying that money, and your private benefit let's assume, is $1,000 worth. Okay. So you feel that, okay, so this was right on, this was perfect. In fact, let's imagine if the burger was so amazing, you said, oh, for me, it was worth 1,500. So in a way, this is what's happening. You're paying a price of 1,000. Your benefit that you saw was 1,500. The benefit you're getting is more than the money that you're paying, and you say, oh, it was completely worth it. Let's order another one. Now, the second one's not going to be as fulfilling as the first one. Why? Because you've already consumed the necessary amount. तो जब भी हम एक और of something consume करने जाते हैं, तो we're always looking at one extra के अंदर हमको क्या happiness मिलने वाली है. That is what we are looking at. तो यहाँ पर भी गवर्नमेंट जब वैक्सीनेशंस की बात करेगी या डैम की बात करेगी और एनी ऑफ दीज गुड्स, that is what they're going to make the consideration on the basis. Okay. I hope that clears the point. उसी तरह से private is all about people paying and consuming that particular good. Okay. Okay. Further, when we move on, if anyone has any other questions, please let me know. All
Sir,
right. Yeah.
is marginal private cost and marginal social cost the same?
I'm assuming in this case to be the same. Okay,
Okay.
simplicity purposes के लिए मैं इनको assume करूंगा because right now I just want to talk about merit goods. Otherwise, it's gonna get too complicated in the end. We'll sort of like bring them all together. So right now my assumption is that there is my private cost and social cost is the same. That means third party के ऊपर production side से there is no problem that is coming in. In my scenario right here, there is a formula. The formula is if I want to find out my marginal social benefit कि society पे overall consumption की benefit क्या आ रहा है, so it's simple. You take the private benefit, people who pay and get the benefit, plus the people who are not paying but somehow are getting the benefit out of it, not getting the COVID basically, or the flu. Or अगर हम education को भी लेके चलते हैं तो education में we say that people who pay, like in our transaction right here, you're paying me, I give you the education, you benefit, I benefit, both of us benefit. However, the third party, people in the future who benefit out of our productivity, our businesses or whatever, तो वो external benefit का basically add on होंगे, and that's how our social benefit will be inclusive. Um, but this is from the private benefits point of view. This is from the point of view merit goods के कि social benefit और social cost दोनों transaction meet कर रही हैं, and this is इसका correction क्या है? Somehow we should be able to reach the social welfare quantity. वो बाद में देखेंगे कि क्या हो रहा है. When we go towards a demerit good, now something else happens when we go towards a demerit goods. हमने demerit के बारे में क्या सीखा है? That it might benefit the person who pays and consumes, but it hurts the third party. It hurts completely unrelated. Now, I go to a restaurant and indoor smoking is allowed, and I paid the cigarette company. I bought myself cigarettes. I smoke. I get the utility. Now, when I say private benefit, I don't mean it's supposed to be something positive. But yes, in terms of happiness, I smoked the cigarette, I got the utility out of it. I drank alcohol, I got the utility out of it. वो मेरा private benefit है. The cigarette company benefits, I benefit out of it. So उसमें क्या होता है demerit के अंदर? About, let's say, 6 billion cigarettes are produced in the economy. Government ने private producers ने देखा people are willing to pay 6 billion for it, and companies paid whatever amount for it, and basically they both are happy. The cigarette companies are happy, the consumers are happy, but the government says, listen, you're not looking at those people who are sitting in the restaurant and they're passive smoking. or you're going around throwing cigarette butts and all, or maybe in the forest you're throwing the cigarette butts, and then now you have this whole wildfire which is uncontrollable. So, because of your consumption of this good, society in a way is not benefiting from your consumption. तो हमारी नजर में cigarettes की production जो होनी चाहिए from the welfare society's point of view should be about 4 billion sticks. Why? Because we felt that जो social benefit है of cigarette consumption, the marginal social benefit, वो यहाँ पर है. This is how the social benefit is. Okay? So, again, from the market failures point of view, we're going to look at where is the market failing. Again, we're going to make an assumption that marginal private cost is equals to marginal social cost. Okay? तो यहाँ पे market failure क्या है? The social cost is up there, and the social benefit of cigarette consumption or alcohol or gambling, the social benefit is way lower and the social cost is much more higher. Government feels we need to cut down on these goods production somehow or consumption so that we can reach the social welfare. ये demerit के point of view से है. Any problems in this? Because ये harmful है. So let me clarify something here if you don't have any questions. If you have any questions, please ask. And then let me clarify some things. Okay.
Sir, what
So
is MSB?
social benefit, the society's benefit after factoring in the third party negative effects.
Okay.
तो society के अंदर because it's hurting the society, government feels that the social benefit overall अगर आप society के harm को भी देखें, private benefit, this is how it works. Society का जो benefit है, that should be the private benefit, people who pay and consume, वो तो इसको यहाँ value कर रहे हैं. People are saying, if the government was not there now, people would have said, okay, we love cigarettes, we enjoy cigarettes and alcohol and weapon and gambling and prostitution and all of these things. We are placing a very high value on it up there. That's our benefit out of it. Private benefit, people paying to get these goods and consume these goods. Lekin government feels that the social benefit is actually way down there because there are a lot of negative effects it creates. So we need to factor that in, all the negativities. So social benefit is down here and private benefit is up there. तो हमें एक्चुअली सोसाइटी के फायदे के लिए we should be looking at the social benefit and the social cost, and this is where the markets should basically produce at the social welfare at 4 billion sticks a year or whatever the alcohol and the gun level is. अब issue जरा समझ लें for a second. In this chapter, when we talk about something called externalities, so let me go to the basics for a second. This whole idea is about externality. What is externalities? एग्जाम के अंदर आप एक्सटर्नैलिटीज को अपने ऐसे में स्पिल ओवर इफेक्ट कहेंगे. What is the spillover effect? The spillover effect is that third party effect. What is that third party? Now, who is the first and the second so that we have to talk about the third? Well, the first party is the person who's paying to get education. The second party is the company which is, or the school which is providing the education. These are the first and the second party. These are benefiting out of the transaction. Or the doctor is getting paid to write a prescription. The medical companies, medicine pharmaceutical companies are making the money and giving you the medicine. You take the medicine, you benefit. You paid, you got something in return. You're the first and the second party. Now, third party is completely unrelated to this transaction, but somehow, magically, they are getting the effect. Now, this effect can be both positive and negative. सो अब हम उसको किस तरह से फैक्टर इन करें, इस स्पिल ओवर इफेक्ट को, इस थर्ड पार्टी को इफेक्ट को हम कैसे फैक्टर इन करते हैं? तो इन योर essays you're going to learn that we want to be cautious and we want to see कि ये जो externalities create हो रही हैं, is it from the consumption side when you consume a good and it is creating a third party effect, or is it from the production side that when you produce something it creates certain effects जिसकी वजह से third party gets negatively affected? Now, for example, a very small basic example, एक bun kebab वाला है, opens a shop, or a milk shop opens a shop. आई थिंक मिल्क को तो फिर भी लोग शायद मेरिट गुड्स की तरफ कंसिडर कर लें, बट मे बी लाइक अ बन कबाब और मकई वाला और लाइक बिस्किट, सुपर बिस्किट्स, और things like this. When people consume, a person pays for it and consumes it. The person stomach feels full, got the happiness or benefit out of it. The company got the money, first party, second party benefits. But really, there's no third party effect on all goods. ये एक simple सा consumer good है, which you pay for, you benefit, and that's it. There's no third party effect of me consuming of that particular good. Merit or demerit में हमने देखा that when you consume, there is a third party effect. Now, when you consume and the third party benefits somehow, तो हम इसके लिए वर्ड यूज करते हैं एक्सटर्नल बेनिफिट. Okay? That third party somehow is benefiting out of this whole transaction. Somehow. To मेरे लेक्चर में हो सकता है, if I have not used the external benefit or positive external benefit, I might have said something like positive externality in consumption. So when you consume something, it has certain positive effect to the society, third party. But sometimes when you consume goods, you actually create a negative externality in consumption. Now, this negative externality in consumption, Bamford treats it with the word external cost. And that is what I would like you to do also. If something is negative, you call it external cost. If something is positive, you call it external benefit. Okay? Simply, you're going to use these words, benefit and cost, for their effect on the society. अब हमारा जो पहला केस है फ्रॉम कंजम्पशन पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू, ऑब्वियसली वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट मेरिट गुड्स ओवर हियर, जिसका मैंने पहला डायग्राम आपको बना के दिखा. एंड द सेकंड वन इज डीलिंग विद demerit goods. And let me bring those diagrams here so that we can relate कि जो हमारा पहला डायग्राम था, this is dealing with that. अभी मैं थोड़ा सा जूम इन कर देता हूं. And this is dealing with this. Now let me just zoom in and you can take a closer look at it. This is what is happening. When we have externalities, we have to consider के question में वो consumption के point of view से कुछ बात कर रहे हैं या production के. If it's from the consumption point of view, is it something which is creating a positive effect? If it's creating positive effect, social benefit should be on the higher side. The market should be failing. We should be increasing our quantity. However, if it is creating, from the consumption point of view, if it's a demerit goods and it is creating an external cost on the society, that means the social benefit should be lesser and we should be producing lesser quantity. You remember AS में हम बोलते थे that merit goods are underproduced by the market? Well, it is right here. We can clearly see that the social welfare quantity is more but the markets are actually producing lesser. So markets are failing because they are not producing at the social welfare quantity of social benefit and social cost. ये एक one of the lectures के अंदर in the essay that we're going to do next, you'll probably notice. Similarly, demerit may we said the market overproduces. So we can see it clearly right here that markets are producing 6 billion while the social welfare quantity is just 4 billion, and the markets are sort of overproducing right over here. तो जब हम कंजम्पशन के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से कर रहे हैं तो यू वुड नोटिस द प्राइवेट बेनिफिट का कर्व इज शिफ्टिंग टू द राइट एंड टू द लेफ्ट. But what happens if we talk about from the production side? Now, this is our production side. Let me bring those. Uh, okay, let's deal with this over here. Now, when we produce goods, there is obviously some sort of problems factories bring into the whole process. Okay? I might be consuming a good like biscuits or something, and the company might be producing biscuits and something. Now we're benefiting in terms of buying and selling, but society is not getting external benefit from the consumption side, but it is somehow getting affected through pollution that those factories are emitting. So यहाँ पर we want to separate the discussion कि क्या whatever you're producing ऐसा तो नहीं है कि वो सोसाइटी पे एक नेगेटिव एक्सटर्नैलिटी क्रिएट कर रही है. External externality from production point of view. कि when you produce some goods, it creates some negative effects on society, जिसको हम कहते हैं external cost. अब ये क्या हो सकता है? Just think of it. एग्जाम्पल के थ्रू भी मैं करा देता हूँ. लेकिन लेट्स सपोज पाकिस्तान में पानी के अंदर जैसा भी रिसेंटली दे अनाउंस्ड आल्सो कि हमें ऑयल मिल गया है. So we're going to sell off those particular patches of land. Okay, oil companies come, put your oil rigs over there, hire people, get your engineers, let's get those expensive tools, let's start drilling and let's find the oil. Let's assume we found that oil. Now, millions of dollars are spent on the infrastructure, but you produce millions of barrels on a daily basis. You extract that oil. Obviously, it's not going to be cheap, but that's your private cost. The extraction ki jo bhi cost hai. Then you take those millions of barrels and you go into the world oil markets and you say, we have oil, we are selling oil. अब जो भी international price होगी उसके ऊपर we're going to sell the oil and people are going to benefit out of it. They're going to make oil-based products of all kinds, जिसमें आपके प्लास्टिक आ जाते हैं, आपका फ्यूल आ जाता है, आपका जेट फ्यूल आ जाता है, and all sorts of things. People will benefit out of it. That's why they're paying a price. Now, इस transaction में oil company, first party, the people who are buying oil and creating stuff and consuming oil-based stuff are the second party, dono benefiting. Now, if this happens offshore of Gwadar or Arabian Sea, now all the fishing community, let's suppose, because of when you're extracting oil from the ocean or the sea, is going to spill oil over a period of time. The ships are going to spill. And what is going to happen? That oil is going to come towards the shore and the marine life is going to die. And the beautification is going to come to a question. The fishing industry over there is going to suffer, and eventually the fishermen are going to suffer. Now, these people were not involved in the transaction of in any kind, but they're getting the negative effect. ये एक्सटर्नल कॉस्ट है जिसकी मैं बात कर रहा हूं. तो इसको हम डायग्राम में किस तरह से दिखाएंगे? So this is how we're going to show it in the diagram. We'll assume that the goods that we are producing is not creating any kind of consumption के point of view से benefit to the society, to the third party. Therefore, the private benefit is equals to the social benefit. The people who pay and consume, that's it. There is no society पे कोई खास benefit. And then there is a private cost of producing these oils and goods and services. And this is where the market decides to produce that we want to produce like 8 million barrels per day. के हिसाब से. That's the quantity because we can sell that. International market will buy that at this particular price. Great, let's do this. Lekin, from the society's point of view, when you factor in those farmers or those fishermen or those people who go to beach every now and then to just, chill at the beach and all, but now they can't because the water is polluted. The marginal social cost is much more higher. Actually, what oil companies are doing is they're only looking at the cost of producing it, but then वो जो सारा toxics और वो जो फेंक रहे हैं, they're throwing that onto the society. They're pushing that onto the society के जाए society, now you deal with it. Actually, you and me are also culprits in this, actually. That when we consume all these goods and services, all these plastic wrapper things and all, ये जब कंपनीज ने प्रोड्यूस किया, उन्होंने प्लास्टिक रैप्स बनाए और जो भी इस ऑयल स्पिल किया और स्मोक स्पिल किया और रिवर्स के अंदर टॉक्सिक्स फेंक दिए, उन्होंने क्या किया, उनका जितना भी टॉक्सिक केमिकल वाटर था, उन्होंने कहा वी डोंट वांट टू डील विद इट, लेट्स थ्रो इट इन द सीवरेज. उन्होंने सीवरेज में डाल के बेसिकली क्या किया, वी डोंट वांट टू डील विद इट, society, you deal with that. This is what we're talking about. The society is dealing with that cost, and the private companies are only looking at the labor cost and the machine cost and the fuel cost and all of these costs. अगर गवर्नमेंट होती तो वो क्या करती, गवर्नमेंट इन कंपनीज को बोलती यू पे फॉर दीज. फिर क्या होता, प्राइवेट कंपनीज जो होती हैं वो क्या देखती, वो कहती नाउ आवर प्राइवेट कॉस्ट इज नॉट आवर प्राइवेट कॉस्ट इज नॉट दिस, वी नीड टू फैक्टर दीज थिंग्स इन नाउ, एंड वी नीड, अब जो सोशल कॉस्ट आ रही है ना, बेसिकली एमपीटी प्लस टैक्स कर लोगे तो दिस इज द कॉस्ट वील हैव टू बेयर. तो ऑब्वियसली द कॉस्ट फॉर देम विल राइज, एंड एज अ रिजल्ट जो सोसाइटी का सोशल कॉस्ट और सोशल बेनिफिट की बेसिस पे जो क्वांटिटी प्रोड्यूस होगी वो कम होगी. Oil companies will produce less million barrels per day because they might realize, but right now they're not, by the way. Right now they're producing over here. The government just feels that they should be producing over here. Abhi, we haven't come to the point that how can we bring these private companies at this point. That's the later part of this topic. Right now, we just want to realize कि वो मार्केट फेलियर असल में है किधर. तो ये जो सोसाइटी पे आपने कॉस्ट डाल दी है इतनी कन्वीनियंटली, नाउ द सोसाइटी हैज टू बेयर दैट दोस कॉस्ट इन टर्म्स ऑफ ऑल दीज कॉस्ट. तो इसका जो डायग्राम है, दिस इज व्हाट द डायग्राम इज फॉर योर एक्सटर्नैलिटी इन प्रोडक्शन का. बेसिकली externality from production side जो negative effect है, this is how the market failure will be shown. Again, देखो basics मेरी वही है. QM के ऊपर I am looking at the social cost and the social benefit, and so there is a failure. We need to cut down on the quantity so that this failure goes away and eventually disappears. Okay. Last but not the least, okay, so I think we're on time. Now, when we are doing production, we also have a situation where our production process actually creates a positive externality in production. It actually creates an external benefit to the society. नाउ ऐसी कौन सी प्रोडक्शन का प्रोसेस है जो सोसाइटी पे पॉजिटिव इफेक्ट करता है? सो फार तो हमने हमेशा यही सीखा है और पढ़ा है that any time a factory produces, it creates emissions, it creates pollution, and it creates toxics, which the society has to deal with. Somehow we're saying कि कोई production of a good आप कर रहे हैं, लेकिन somehow the society is actually benefiting out of this whole process. There is a positive effect on the society. And that is what the whole recyclable markets are all about, the pre-loved markets. So one of my friend, basically what he does is he basically get these pre-loved jeans and all, not the designer ones, but the ones that people throw away. You know, when people throw away all these used clothing, which are not sold in the secondary markets, when they throw it, when you throw the wrappers, when you throw all the garbage, all sorts of garbage that we're talking about. Now, this garbage could be कि आपने घर की construction की है, and now you have all those, bricks and mortar and all of those. एक ये भी होता है. एक वो होता है जो wet garbage होता है, जो हमारे kitchens वगैरह से में निकलता है, जिसमें all sorts of there's wastages, and then you have the sewerage wala hota hai. There are all sorts of garbage that we produce when we consume stuff and when we produce stuff. Now, pre-loved ke andar kya hota hai? He basically gets the genes from all over the world and he basically breaks it down. बिल्कुल कॉटन फॉर्म में उसको करता है. Then he remakes that into the yarn and produces jeans out of it and then sells it in the international market with a stamp on it कि ये recycled है. Now we know the international markets are going towards recyclables a lot. They are working towards renewable energies and all. राइट. सो उसके अंदर अब ये हो क्या रहा है? यूके की मार्केट, यूरोपियन मार्केट्स नाउ रिक्वायर कंपनीज टू यूज 30%, 50% रिसाइकल्ड मटेरियल. अब ये रिसाइकल्ड मटेरियल आ कहाँ से रहा है? यू एंड आई, जो हम लोगों ने ये सारी गार्बेज डिस्पोज करने के लिए सोसाइटी पे फेंक दिए कि पुट इट इन द लैंड माइन, बर्न इट, create toxins out of it. Now these companies are going and they're looking for these things and they're buying it off the market. They're paying money to buy these things off the market. They're solving a society's problem of the toxic, which was supposed to be created, which was supposed to be society's problem. But now they're buying it, they're recreating it. साथ ही में they're not demanding कि हम नए कॉटन और नई जीन्स और नए रॉ मटेरियल्स जो वैसे ही स्केर्स हैं उसको खरीदें. तो उसकी वजह से क्या हो रहा है? Let's look at our final diagram of the day, which is the society looks at it from the positive side. They say we should have more of these production processes. Let's encourage them. Okay, let's produce these goods because what these goods are doing is that they are solving society's problem for us. The social cost is lower than the private cost. Okay? Firms क्या देख रही हैं? Okay, this process is really difficult. How is it difficult? We have to acquire these genes from all over the world. It's pain to do that. And plus, because they're so scarce, it's actually costly. I don't know if you know, but these raw materials are actually more expensive because दुनिया के अंदर all what we do with these wastages is we all bring it together and then we dump it. Now, in order to just separate jeans from it or plastic from it, you need a whole recyclable ka system, which the Western economies have basically developed, right? कि आप वेट डस्टबिन जो गार्बेज है वो इस वाले स्लॉट में डालें, प्लास्टिक बॉटल्स इसमें डालें, पेपर कप्स इसमें डालें, न्यूज़पेपर्स इसमें डालें. So they've actually come up with the process, so they're doing that. We still need to. तो हमारे यहाँ हमें बड़ी मुश्किल से ये रिसोर्सेज को अक्वायर करना पड़ता है. दे आर कॉस्टली रिसोर्सेज बाय द वे. सो द जीन्स दैट माय फ्रेंड इज लुकिंग एट, उसको प्राइवेट कॉस्ट ज्यादा आती है to make these jeans. That's why he wants to get paid more for it. लेकिन जब हम सोसाइटी के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से देखते हैं, तो इट इज सॉल्विंग अ सोसाइटीज प्रॉब्लम. द सोशल कॉस्ट इज एक्चुअली लोअर इन दैट केस. तो मार्केट फेलियर इज राइट ओवर हियर. Okay, and we should have more of these production processes, and so we can solve the whole problem. और ये हमारा फाइनल डायग्राम बेसिकली हो जाता है इस पर्टिकुलर कॉन्टेक्स्ट के अंदर. So you need to excel basically in this particular four things that we've talked about, right? इसके ऊपर I have done the lectures. There are plenty material. I just revisited it because I knew that most of you will not know this stuff, and you might actually feel still complication on this. Don't worry, you need to go into those lectures and you have to see. अब reality में क्या होता है? रियलिटी के अंदर हम बेसिकली एक कॉस्ट बेनिफिट एनालिसिस करते हैं. उसका भी एक लेक्चर मैंने किया हुआ है. कॉस्ट बेनिफिट एनालिसिस क्या, इट्स वन ऑफ दोज लोअर साइड के ऊपर, वेयर वी सेड कि गवर्नमेंट को they're looking at that should we produce one more dam or not. Okay, this is what the government is thinking. Should we produce one more dam or should we not? Let's look at the cost. Let's look at the benefit. If we don't have any dams, that's a big problem. Government feels अगर हमारे पास कोई डैम नहीं है, तो पहले डैम की जो डिमांड होनी चाहिए, that should be high in value. But as you start creating more and more dams, the benefit starts to actually fall down. I don't know if it makes sense to you, but जब अगर पाकिस्तान के अंदर लेट्स सपोज ऊपर से पानी आ रहा है कश्मीर से और ऑल द वे इट्स गोइंग टू द अरेबियन सी, if you have zero dams, the water will just flow down and you can use whatever you can, right? But if you have a dam at the top, what you can do is you can actually store water जिसको आप बाकी साल के लिए यूज कर सकते हो ना. That's a high value dam, right? So people, अगर आप उनसे चार्ज भी करना चाहो ना डैम सर्विसेज के लिए, तो पीपल ऑल कलेक्टिवली विल पे अ वेरी हाई प्राइस फॉर इट. अब ऊपर वाला तो बन गया विच इज सिक्योरिंग यू इन अ वे. फिर आप उससे नीचे एक और बनाते हैं दैट कैन सिक्योर यू इवन इन अनदर वे, बट उसका जो बेनिफिट होगा वो रिलेटिवली कम होगा. फिर जैसे जैसे आप आगे बढ़ते जाएंगे, तो क्या होगा कि आपकी हर एक्स्ट्रा डैम का जो एडवांटेज है वो गिरता जाएगा, क्योंकि वो उस पर्टिकुलर क्लोज एरिया के लिए पहला डैम पूरे पाकिस्तान को फायदा पहुंचाएगा, दूसरा डैम जो है एक स्पेसिफिक रीजन को ज्यादा फायदा पहुंचाएगा. ऊपर वालों को तो नहीं पहुंचाएगा लेकिन नीचे वालों को पहुंचाएगा. फिर और नीचे आ जाओगे तो फिर वो नीचे वालों को फायदा पहुंचाएगा, ऊपर वालों को नहीं. So the benefit starts to reduce. So people will be willing to pay less price for it, hence marginal transfer. Now on the other side, dams are costly stuff to make. एक एक डैम बिलियंस ऑफ डॉलर कॉस्ट करता है. पहला डैम जो आप प्रोबेबली प्रोड्यूस करेंगे ना, वो एक तो नंबर वन हायर साइड पे ही प्रोड्यूस करेंगे बिकॉज उसका प्राइवेट बेनिफिट बहुत ज्यादा है. लेकिन यू गोइंग टू मेक श्योर कि आप उस डैम को ऐसी जगह बनाएं कि वहां उसकी जो जियोग्राफिकल सिचुएशन होनी चाहिए वो ऐसी होनी चाहिए कि कम से कम कॉस्ट के अंदर आप वो डैम प्रोड्यूस कर लें. ऐसे रिजेस की तरफ वो बनाएं कि यू डोंट हैव टू डू अ लॉट ऑफ इंजीनियरिंग एंड डिफिकल्ट प्रोसेसेस टू डू दैट. इट विल बी मच मोर इजियर फॉर यू टू फाइंड दैट स्पेस ऑल्सो. तो प्राइवेट कॉस्ट जो डैम बनाने की आ रही है वो ये आ रही है. अगर आप किसी प्राइवेट सेक्टर से बोलते हैं कि डैम बना लें, तो दे गोइंग टू लुक एट ओके हाउ मच मनी डू वी नीड टू स्पेंड, हाउ मच मनी कैन वी गेट फ्रॉम इट. तो ये प्राइवेट बेनिफिट, प्राइवेट कॉस्ट, दे गोइंग टू मेक एक्स नंबर ऑफ डैम्स. दे अस्यूम कि व्हाट, पाकिस्तान के अंदर 3 डैम जो है दैट इज गुड इनफ, दैट इज सफिशिएंट, वी डोंट नीड टू मेक एनी मोर देन दिस. लेकिन नाउ डैम when we produce it, उसका सोशल बेनिफिट ज्यादा है. when we consume the dam, उसका सोसाइटी पे बहुत अच्छे अच्छे इफेक्ट्स आते हैं. उस तरह के इफेक्ट्स हमारे पास इफेक्ट्स होते हैं इन टर्म्स ऑफ फ्लड प्रोटेक्शन. उससे आपके बिलियंस ऑफ डॉलर्स बच जाते हैं. एवरी फ्लड कॉस्ट यू millions of dollars. लाइवलीहुड जो लोगों की जिंदगी, उसको कैसे डॉलर में वैल्यू करोगे? दैट इज एक्सटर्नैलिटीज आर डिफिकल्ट टू मेजर, कि ह्यूमन लाइफ कैसे मेजर कर सकते हो? या एक बंदा है, उसका क्रॉप डिस्ट्रॉय हो गया, उसकी मेंटल फिजिकल उसको कैसे करोगे? सो नाउ डैम बनाने से यू प्रोटेक्ट ऑल दीज पीपल, तो वी फील दैट दिस इज वेयर द सोशल बेनिफिट इज मच हायर। लेकिन सो उसके हिसाब से तो गवर्नमेंट फील्स दैट, यू नो व्हाट, we should actually be making like 4 or 5 dams. This is where our dams should be. We should be making 5 dams. अगर इतना प्राइवेट बेनिफिट है, but we have to also factor in, जब हम डैम बनाते हैं तो you have to मूव पीपल फ्रॉम देयर लैंड्स, क्योंकि आपको रिवर डाइवर्ट करनी होती है, आपको डिफॉरेस्टेशन करनी पड़ती है। 5 साल आप जब डैम बनाते हैं तो आप जबरदस्त तरीके से धुआं करते हैं उस एरिया में। लैंड माइंस, आप सॉरी लैंड माइंस कह रहा हूँ, वहां पे डायनामाइट्स चलाते हैं, पूरे एरिया की ब्यूटिफिकेशन को डिस्ट्रॉय करते हैं। सो देर इज अ कॉस्ट दैट गोज देयर। तो हमने उस कॉस्ट को फैक्टर इन करना है कि व्हेन वी प्रोड्यूस अ डैम, we actually create externalities to it. Now, let's suppose this is how much the social cost is. All right. Now, private sector say, if you were to say how many dams would you produce, the private sector would say, okay, this is the cost, this is the money we can recover from it. 3 dams we're interested in producing. जब गवर्नमेंट देखेगी तो गवर्नमेंट बोलेगी कि वी नीड टू फैक्टर इन द सोशल बेनिफिट एंड द सोशल कॉस्ट, एंड बेस्ड ऑन दैट we should have at least 4 dams. This is the social welfare. Do you understand? Now, this is basically we bringing all of the 4 things: the externalities from the production side, externality from the consumption side. Any questions so far? Because I've said quite a lot this hour. Any questions so far? अब थोड़ा सा इसको obviously ऐसे के through I'll make sense of it also, because इसके ऊपर जितने भी questions आए हैं ना market failure के अंदर, those questions are about solutions. What is the way that we can reach the social welfare today, right? So we're going to deal with that. But you guys are there. I need a thumbs up or something that you are.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I know it's exhausting. I know it's a lot, but so now this process, what we're about to do, is an important one. So at the same time, okay, Ji, let's take a look at this question and let's try and make sense of it. They're saying market failure exists in all economies. All economies is all types of economies. You have free market, you have mixed economies, you have all countries in the world, right? That's what we're talking about here. They're saying evaluate with the aid of a diagram or diagrams. Bracket के अंदर का मतलब होता है that you need to have at least one diagram. But obviously A2s के अंदर एक diagram से तो आप कुछ भी नहीं कर सकते. You need to have series of diagrams. The meaning of market failure. So evaluate with the aid of diagrams the meaning of market failure. That's one part, meaning of market failure. And 2 policies of a government that they can use to correct the market failure. We haven't spoken anything about the corrections, but you tend to do have knowledge about it. So one of the things that I would like you to focus on also, because new chapter, so let's go over how you're supposed to write an answer. You have a 20 mark का question. It's one big question. Micro के 2 questions में से आपने एक question करना होता है. It's a 20 marker. It should be a lengthy essay. You have about 40 minutes to write one essay. So you have plenty of time. All right. So that means that if your essay is done before 40 minutes, that means there's stuff missing, no matter how fast you write. Your answer is basically broken down into two areas. One is for 14 marks. 14 मार्क्स जो होते हैं वो असेसमेंट ऑब्जेक्टिव 1 एंड असेसमेंट ऑब्जेक्टिव 2 के लिए ब्रेक डाउन हुआ होता है. असेसमेंट ऑब्जेक्टिव 1 इज टॉक टू मी अबाउट नॉलेज एंड अंडरस्टैंडिंग. मार्केट फेलियर समझ आता है, एफिशिएंसी का वर्ड समझ आता है, करेक्शन में सब्सिडी या जो भी पॉलिसीज हैं, क्या डू यू नो दोज, व्हाट आर दोज थिंग्स. तो बेसिक अंडरस्टैंडिंग्स. AO2 इज एनालिसिस. एनालिसिस के अंदर you are going to answer this question जिसके अंदर you will have to explain me how market failure is happening graphically and all and with words. Then you have to talk to me about the policies and how those policies will enable the producer to achieve the quantity that we're trying to get at. Okay? आंसर को हम देखेंगे तीन चार लेवल्स में. लेवल 0, लेवल 1, level 2, and level 3. So when we read your answer, while reading, we're going to make mental notes. Has she or he spoken about anything worth or correct? If there is nothing, 0. Misunderstood the question, question कुछ और है, लिख कुछ और है. You give me basic definitions, but you're not really answering in terms of the two policies, how they work, how to correct the problem, what is market failure. Very little, some knowledge, understanding के points. I have about a range of 1 to 5. I can give you the marks. But then you have explained me, tried to explain me some of the policies. Okay. So I have about 6 to 10 ka range in which I can give you the marks. You've done some things, but diagram is missing. Some, अच्छी explanation नहीं है, बहुत brief है, lengthy नहीं है. Especially the worst you can do, the worst. You are not connecting to the question. If you're talking about solution, two policies, but when you explain those two policies, you are not connecting that this is how it fixes the market failure ka problem. This is how under allocation ka problem is solved and so on. But if you've done all of it, I can give you mark from the range of 11 to 14. Okay? We want to make sure that we answer every bit of the question in our best capacity in the 30 minutes that we have out of 40. 10 minutes evaluation के लिए आप रखेंगे, 30 minutes आप analysis के ऊपर यूज करेंगे, and you're gonna cover every single thing so that जब examiner आपका answer read करके फारिग हो, तो he would think to himself and he'd say, you know what, they've actually talked about everything that the question requires, and the marking scheme is saying it's a level 3 answer. So now I have to decide कि मैं इसको 11 दूं या 14 दूं. So examiners have told us that always start from the middle. इसमें middle थोड़ा सा मुश्किल है, but I can say the middle is somewhere near 12 or 13. Okay? So if you've done reasonably good job, I'll give you 13. If you've done phenomenal job, I'll give you 14. That's rare, but I can give you 13. But it's less than amazing, but you've covered all the bases. So I'll give you somewhere near 12. But if you've just covered them, I'll give you 11. This is how. Now, just imagine इसमें कितना ज़्यादा examiner के पास power है to give you mark or cut mark. So we want to be safe. We want to aim for at least 13 or a 14 in our answers. उसके बाद बेसिकली जो 6 मार्क्स हैं वो AO3 के लिए रखे हैं, जिसको हम इवैल्यूएशन कहते हैं. Evaluation in AS was completely different. I'm from experience, I'm telling you, because AS के तो मैं एग्जाम्स चेक करता हूँ for the Cambridge. I know कि वहाँ evaluation के marks achieve करना was almost near impossible. यहाँ evaluation के marks are free. Give yourself 10 minutes, get 6 out of 6 if you can, because all you have to do is counter. इधर counter क्या बनता है? सिंपल पॉलिसी क्या है? यू हैव टू गिव मी टू पॉलिसीज विच कैन बी यूज टू करेक्ट मार्केट फेलियर। तो मैंने काउंटर क्या करना है, वो जो दो पॉलिसीज मैंने बताई हैं, मैंने उन पॉलिसीज की लिमिटेशंस या फेलियर्स को डिस्कस करना है कि हाउ दे माइट नॉट फिक्स द प्रॉब्लम। एएस में ऐसे नहीं होता था, बाय द वे। एएस के अंदर काउंटर यूज टू बी पार्ट ऑफ एनालिसिस, नॉट एनी मोर। सो लकी यू इन ए टूज। सो लेकिन इसमें भी इवेल्युएशन जो है तीन लेवल्स में ब्रेक होती हैं। लेवल 0, लेवल 1 एंड लेवल 2। Level 0 के अंदर you're going to get, obviously you haven't done even a single counter argument, so 0. Level 1 के अंदर you have done reasonably, एक पॉलिसी को अच्छा ही है, simply तुमने समझाया है, you've done the discussion, I can give you up to 1 to 3 marks. And then if you've done a phenomenal job with conclusion, by the way, there's a whole new mark for conclusion also. You can get up to 4 to 6 marks if you've done the counter argument with a conclusion. Get yourself another 4 to 6 marks, level 2 ke upar, and be on the safer side. This is how the marking is basically done. All right. So, so one of the things I can definitely tell you is market scheme. If you notice, whenever you come across market schemes, marking scheme के ऊपर देखा करो ये publish का word लिखा होना जरूरी है। Okay, because sometimes what happens is some of the examiners जो हैं वो शुरू के अंदर certain teachers वो एक starting के अंदर एक pre standardization एक ये भी लिखा हुआ होता है sometimes. If it's a pre-standardization wali, to be cautious, because pre-standardization means that this was the marking scheme which was made before the exam was even conducted. So the process that happens is कि आपने एग्जामिनर ने क्वेश्चन बनाया, उसकी एक मार्किंग स्कीम बनाई बेस्ड ऑन व्हाट ही वाज थिंकिंग शुड बी देयर इन द आंसर्स। ठीक है, कैम्ब्रिज के अंदर बैठा हुआ जो भी बंदा है के अंदर। And then once the exam has happened all over the world in different regions, up to 4 regions हो गए, and now when the examination is done, अब जब वो examiner साथ बैठते हैं, they do a meeting, they take sample examinations, and they shortlist a marking scheme जो उसने starting में marking scheme बनाई होती है, उसको वो देखते हैं कि have the majority of the kids in the paper are actually talking about this stuff or not. So what they feel should be there and what they feel kids have repeated, they basically bring those certain things, because उसमें क्या होता है कि different countries में different अंग्रेजी के levels होते हैं, different perception होते हैं लोगों के, different understanding होती है, comprehension skills होती हैं, तो थोड़ा बहुत people write differently or understand the question differently. So they try to bring everyone together and they create a marking scheme which they eventually publish. And then all the assistant examiners are told कि अब आपने इसको follow कर, ठीक हो गया? So when you're following that, so you will be given something like this. This is how a marking scheme looks like. Now, A2 के अंदर marking scheme is much more extensive. लेकिन still there is a lot of details which are missing there. तो इसमें they try to cover as much कि क्या क्या चीजें होनी चाहिए for understanding and all, and what are the stuff which the kids should be writing about in that. So I'll try and cover as much as we can in this. और फिर obviously evaluation के अंदर क्या क्या points हो सकते हैं. You need to make sure that you are covering maximum points in a wholesome way. So, सबसे पहले, you want to explain market failure. From this point onwards, I would like you to explain some things when you're writing about market failure. Number one, हम ये लिखेंगे कि market failure, so I would expect you guys to start writing also. साथ साथ चलो मेरे. Question you can write, ये June 24 variant 42 का question number 2 है. So this is June 24 variant 42. That's our variant actually. and question number 2, micro का. So first standardized situation is you have to write me that market failure को define करते हैं. Market failure is a situation where the free market fails to allocate resources efficiently. All right. So market failure, something has to do with this word efficient. Now, whenever you talk about efficiency, you must explain me what efficiencies there are. Now, most of you have done this with me in the previous chapter, so just bear with me today. So continue करते हैं. So allocative in market fails to allocate resources efficiency, resulting in an outcome where society's welfare is not maximized. What do I mean by that? So let's go into a little more detail of what do I mean by that. तो थोड़ा सा थ्योरी पे आते हैं, बिकॉज थ्योरी तुम्हारे लिए की थिंग इज द थ्योरी, राइट? थ्योरी के लिए इफ यू राइट गुड थ्योरी यू कैन गेट इजीली 10 out of 20. That's not a problem. So at least that's a good start. So from theoretical perspective, markets achieve allocative efficiency. इसका फॉर्मूला था, हमने मार्केट स्ट्रक्चर्स में भी पढ़ा है. Market achieves allocative efficiency when the marginal social cost is equals to marginal social benefit. Please abbreviation नहीं यूज करोगे. पहली दफा आप पूरी चीज लिखेंगे, so you're gonna write the whole marginal social benefit bracket MSB is equals to marginal social cost bracket MSC. ठीक है? Or where marginal cost, yeah, price is equals to marginal cost. Price is the same thing as average cost. ये market failure, ये हमने market structures में किया हुआ है. Usually, what we see this is P equals to MC जो है ना, वो ज्यादातर यूज होता है in perfectly competitive markets. Now, this is also perfect competition की एक बात, और O level में this is something that we've done. तो ये मार्केट उसके अंदर ये डिस्कस होता है जनरली इन परफेक्टली कंपेटिटिव मार्केट. नॉट मच टू डू इन आवर एसे ओवर हियर. हमारा एसे के अंदर क्या हमने बात करनी है, लेट्स गो इनटू दैट फॉर अ मिनट. सो मार्केट फेलियर ना, सो व्हेन दिस कंडीशन जो अभी हमने ऊपर बताई है, व्हेन दिस कंडीशन इज नॉट achieved, okay, there is allocative inefficiency. Okay. Similarly, now जब भी हम efficiency की बात करते हैं, we try and fit in something called productive efficiency also. तो ये समझ लो कि ये जो मैं तुमको बता रहा हूँ ना, जब भी मार्केट फेलियर का सवाल आएगा, you have to have this standard this paragraph. You're going to learn it, and you're just going to start writing. Similarly, productive inefficiency also arises when firms fail to produce at the minimum average cost curve, meaning resources are not being used in the least cost manner. ये आपका स्टैंडर्ड पैराग्राफ है. इसको और जबरदस्त करना है, यू कैन मेक अ डायग्राम. कौन सा डायग्राम बना सकते हैं? दिस इज द डायग्राम आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट. एक सिंपल सा बेसिक सा डिमांड एंड सप्लाई का डायग्राम बनाए. ओके, जिसके अंदर आप make yourself, something like marginal social benefit, marginal social cost. This is where the market, uh, sorry, no, this is where the social welfare quantity is. Okay. But let's assume the market produces lesser at QM. So the market is obviously failing. Cost benefit के point of view से अगर हम करें, so you can actually make this diagram to show that how market failure is happening when you are producing below that level or you are producing above that particular level. Social welfare quantity. तो ये आपका जो failure है ना, basically ये आपके failures हैं कि आप social welfare और social quantity के ऊपर नहीं जा रहे हैं. Now, the thing with the question is that this question basically is completely ignoring कि कौन सी वाली एक्सटर्नैलिटी की बात करें. द क्वेश्चन इज वेरी ओपन एंडेड. आप चार में से कोई भी किसी की भी पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से भी लिख सकते हैं. इट्स अप टू यू. ओके, बिकॉज एट द एंड ऑफ द डे वी वांट अ सॉल्यूशन टू द प्रॉब्लम. ऑलराइट, आवर एम इज वी नीड टू ब्रिंग द सॉल्यूशन. आगे बढ़. सो once you've explained me this, then you have to tell me some of the market failure ke scenarios. One of the scenarios we can write about is in terms of the externalities that we spoke about, right? So we can say um, one of the reason, one of the reason for market failure is the presence of externalities. अब a negative externality. So let me explain. A negative externality arises when the production or consumption, क्योंकि question open-ended है, तो I need to look at both sides. क्योंकि negative externality consumption के side से भी हो सकती है और production side से भी हो सकती है. So दोनों तरफ से it can have an impact. So from the consumption or production of a good imposes external cost on the third party, also known as the spillover effect. Spillover effect. This is the word which is used commonly in marking schemes. हर में नहीं होता, but generally externalities को explain करने के लिए they use this word. Okay? So दिस इज आवर स्पिल ओवर इफेक्ट. ओके, अब एक डायग्राम बना लें आप. ठीक है, किस चीज का बनाएंगे? इट्स अप टू यू. कंजम्पशन साइड से बनाना है कि प्रोडक्शन साइड से बनाना है? सो लेट्स गो ओवर दैट डायग्राम अगेन, जो आज हमने किए हैं. um, so when you're doing your diagrams, make sure you don't miss out on any label. Any label you miss out on is problematic. Quantity over here, cost and benefit over there, and marginal private benefit, marginal private cost, and this is where the market produces. You want to suggest some of these things. So this is our diagram. यहाँ पे market produce कर रही है. लेकिन let's suppose यहाँ पर in this particular type of good, I'm making a diagram for a good जो पोल्यूशन करती है. प्रोडक्शन करते हैं ना, तो पोल्यूशन क्रिएट करती है. तो इसका मतलब क्या हो गया कि मेरा जो मार्जिनल सोशल बेनिफिट है, that is the same as this, because it's not from the consumption side that I'm talking about. I'm talking from the production side. So this particular good creates a negative externality on the society. The social cost is higher. Um, okay. तो इस सिचुएशन में क्या हो गया? From the market's point of view, the markets are going to produce at QM, but from the social welfare point of view, we should be producing at QSW. And where is the market failure? QM के ऊपर. This entire area represents the market failure. Obviously, the question eventually will lead towards the policies. उसके बगैर आप लेवल 3 पे नहीं जा सकते हैं. अच्छा जी, so अब मेरी एक्सप्लेनेशन के अंदर, व्हाट एक्सप्लेनेशन, पूरा डायग्राम क्योंकि आपने समझाना है ना, so you don't need to go into too much details, but at least you gotta talk about that, like the market equilibrium is where marginal private benefit is equals to marginal private cost, right? Whereas the social efficient output is where the marginal social benefit equals marginal social cost, right? Because that's what they're looking at. So clearly, in free market, there is overproduction because it ignores the external cost, right? तो ये हमारे ये एक बेसिक सी एक्सप्लेनेशन है. And the shaded triangle shows the welfare loss. ठीक है. इसी तरह से then you have to do for the other side, which is बस एक तरफ तो ये बात हो गई हमारी, but दूसरी तरफ we have to also look at it from the positive externality side, because the question is open-ended. Yeah, just failure, और we decided कि हम externalities की बात कर रहे हैं. So we'll have to do another diagram for that. और ये वाला जो डायग्राम होगा we'll consider from the external benefit point of view. मेरिट के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से कर लेते हैं. सेम थिंग, कॉस्ट benefit, marginal private benefit, marginal
Sir, the
private
first
cost.
diagram was through the demerit point of view.
No, it wasn't from the demerit point of view. It was from the point of view कि जब हम production करते हैं तो the good actually creates negative effect from the production side. Look, I've shifted the supply sort of a curve. So that means if
Okay.
this curve is shifting, that means हम production point of view से बात कर रहे हैं. I could have done the demerit वाला side also. But I felt कि, ज्यादातर जब वो नेगेटिव एक्सटर्नैलिटी की बात करते हैं, दे पिक ऑन द प्रोडक्शन वाला साइड, एंड जब बेनिफिट की बात करते हैं तो दे यूजुअली पिक ऑन द मेरिट वाला साइड, मेरिट गुड,
Okay, sir.
दे गोना शिफ्ट दिस.
Thank you.
या सो इसके अंदर क्या होगा कि इसके अंदर ऑब्वियसली द मार्केट इज प्रोड्यूसिंग एट क्यू एम, बट द सोशल बेनिफिट, बिकॉज ये मेरिट के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से मैं बात कर रहा हूँ, तो positive externality from the consumption. Yeah, by the way, it's open-ended. You could have done from again from the production side also. कोई मसला नहीं है. In fact, मैं अपने write-up के अंदर sort of like include कर लूंगा. But this is where the social benefit and the social cost intersects, and this is where we should be producing. The market is underproducing these goods, and you have these market failure ka triangle, which again we should sort of explain here. So, okay, let me use. So, conversely, positive externalities occurs when consumption or production, all right, हमारे इस केस के अंदर तो it's all consumption, consumption or production generates external benefit, keywords, okay? Here, the marginal social benefit is above marginal private benefit, and free market and free market equilibrium leads to underconsumption relative to social efficient या optimum output, right? You can explain it through the diagram also कि जो diagram है वो क्या show कर रहा है, the shaded area, the something like the diagram shows that the marginal social benefit is greater than marginal private benefit. I think we have sort of explained, और ये जो welfare का ऊपर से examiner will understand. Now, we've done the first basic part of the essay. You can get up to like close to, level two. We're looking at not six, but you're looking at somewhere around 8 to 9 marks. You've done so far 8 to 9 marks, ka write-up. Okay. In order to go further, you need to really answer the question. The question is, suggest two policies through which we can solve this problem. Okay. So the two problems that we have is, so we want to make sure that we start off with a new paragraph, and we will sort of lead the examiner. And now we are going towards the question, which is to correct the market failure, government intervenes using variety of policies. We just need to discuss two, so we should be like good at them. One form is a subsidy. ओके, ये मेरिट गुड्स में खास तौर पे हम यूज करेंगे टू इनकरेज consumption of goods with positive externalities. Example could be like your merit goods like education and healthcare, you know, vaccinations. So, अब ये, how are we supposed to show this? Now, there are ways we can do this. So this is what we're doing, just bear with me with this diagram. And if it confuses you at any point, you tell me. हम क्या बात कर रहे हैं that from the cost and the benefit point of view and the quantity, we had private benefit, we had private cost. Now we're clearly talking about कौन से वाले goods? The goods which has positive externality. We're talking about merit goods, right? तो मेरिट गुड्स के अंदर हमने ये सीखा है थ्रू आवर डायग्राम्स दैट एक्चुअली द गवर्नमेंट इज अंडर प्रोड्यूसिंग दीज गुड्स. अब हमने इसका मसला हल करना है बिकॉज सोशल वेलफेयर क्वांटिटी इज ओवर हियर, इट्स ऑन द राइट हैंड साइड. क्योंकि रिमेंबर हमारा जो सोशल बेनिफिट का डायग्राम होता था दैट वाज सपोज टू बी ऑन द हायर साइड अप हियर. तो अब मार्केट्स के अंदर इस मसले का हल, बिकॉज हल तो ये है कि प्राइवेट बेनिफिट नीड्स टू जंप टू द राइट or the private cost needs to come down. So imagine if the government gives subsidies, what will happen? AS में और O level में हमने सीखा था that whenever subsidies are given, your supply curve shifts to the right. Basically, this is what is going to happen. आपका जो MPC कर्व है वो सब्सिडी के साथ बेसिकली MPC का कर्व नीचे की तरफ आ जाएगा. It's sort of like just making a supply curve shifting to the right when subsidy is given. And based on that, now the market's private cost and private benefit is willing and able to provide the social welfare quantity through subsidies. तो इस तरह से आपका डायग्राम जो है वो शिफ्ट होता है टू द राइट. बेसिकली subsidy lowers the cost of production for the producers. सब्सिडी की वजह से supply curve shifts to the right, prices falls down, the social welfare quantity is achieved, um, and this is how the correction is likely to happen. तो मैं डायग्राम के अंदर इसकी फिर राइटअप लिख लेते हैं. छोटा सा राइटअप, not much is required. Any questions on the diagram that I've made over here? That what am I doing? Because remember वो जो हमारा social benefit का जो diagram बनता है ना, social benefit and social cost with externalities, that's from the government's point of view. That is what they feel. That's their desire where the economy should be, right? But that's not where the economy is. तो हमने बेसिकली वो जो वेयर इट शुड बी वाली क्वांटिटी थी उसको हमने अचीव किया where economy really is through subsidies, and the supply curve shifts to the right, prices fall down, affordability increases, and we achieve the social welfare quantity. तो इसका फिर हम लिखते हैं that um, in the diagram a subsidy shifts the MPC curve downwards, reducing price and increasing consumption towards the marginal social benefit and marginal social cost, social optimum, जो ऊपर पहले डायग्राम में हमने दिखाई है. So this is how we can reach. इससे क्या होगा when we shift to the right like this, वो जो market failure produce हो रहा था, जो market skew M के ऊपर produce कर रहे थे, over here, when you start producing more, that welfare is basically lost also. It goes away. तो वो problem भी solve हो जाता है. So this leads to a reduction in welfare loss. ठीक हो गया. So that is one of our policy. Um, First policy, we've explained how it works. Analysis, now you qualify for level 3. You can get the lowest mark of level 3 because you are not giving another one. तो मैक्सिमम तुमको 11 मिल सकते हैं, 11 से ऊपर बिल्कुल भी नहीं मिल सकते अभी इस वक्त. बट इफ यू गिव मी अनदर वन जिसके अंदर हम नेगेटिव एक्सटर्नैलिटी का प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व करना चाह रहे हैं, तो उसका डायग्राम किस तरीके से बनेगा? यू विल हैव द सेम स्टैंडर्ड सिचुएशन वेयर यू आर सेइंग कि देखें जी, marginal private benefit, marginal private cost. This is where the market is producing. लेकिन जहां एक्सटर्नैलिटीज होती हैं तो हमें पता है कि वहां पे जो सोशल वेलफेयर क्वांटिटी होता है वो कम साइड पे होता है. Sorry, I think I made a mistake. Yeah, this is supposed to be market, QM. This is where the market is producing, but the social welfare tends to be on the lower side, from the negative side. So I want to work with another policy. Indirect taxes is one of our, go-to policies, subsidies के against. तो इससे क्या होता है, इनडायरेक्ट टैक्सेस से आपका सप्लाई कर्व बढ़ जाता है. जैसे ऑयल जो प्रोड्यूस हम करते हैं और वो जब पोल्यूशन करता है, तो अगर हम टैक्स लगा दें तो व्हाट हैपेंस इज फॉर द फर्म्स, basically MPC plus tax के बाद the cost of production actually goes up, and as a result the social welfare quantity is achieved, and the problem that we have is basically sorted. ठीक है, ये दो हमारी बेसिक स्टैंडर्ड पॉलिसीज हैं. एज वी डू मोर क्वेश्चंस वी आर गोना कम ऑफ अबाउट more policies. I can talk about it later on, but for now let's focus on this essay and how we are writing this essay. Another policy is indirect taxation, not direct taxation, indirect taxation on, obviously indirect tax goods पे ही लगते हैं, with negative externality, because we're trying to solve the problem with negative externalities, such as you have पेट्रोल हो सकता है. इनफैक्ट अगर आप कंजम्पशन के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से बात करें तो इवन लाइक कंजम्पशन ऑफ लाइक सिगरेट्स, ये डायग्राम वैसे सिगरेट्स वाला नहीं है, ये डीमेरिट वाले का मसले का हल है. बिकॉज एट द एंड ऑफ द डे व्हेन वी वांट द क्वांटिटी, वेलफेयर क्वांटिटी टू फॉल, सॉरी द मार्केट क्वांटिटी टू फॉल, इनडायरेक्ट टैक्सेस विल वर्क विद एवरीथिंग. So petrol and cigarettes के अंदर कर सकते हैं. Explanation could be that a tax shifts the MPC curve upwards to coincide with what MSC, जो हमारा ऊपर जो पहली दफा बनाया था हमने, to coincide with MSC, internalizing, I've seen this word by the way in marking scheme. Internalizing का मतलब क्या होता है कि पहले these businesses, what they do is they externalize the external cost. तो वो क्या कर रहे थे, they take that toxic water, dump it in the sewerage, and now it's the people जो pollution face करेंगे, it's their problem. तो अब क्या होता है कि अब आप basically now that you have been taxed on it, so now you have to deal with these costs. तो इसको हम बोलते हैं now you have to internalize the external cost जो आपने society पे push कर दी थी, now you have to deal with it. And so this is how diagram is going to work. And the prices will rise. Okay, so price rises and quantity reaches the social welfare output, या optimum output, right? Something along that line. तो ये हमारा basically analysis हो गया. Other policies के अंदर obviously एक हम later on we're going to talk about how we can advertise and solve this problem. Then we can have government coming in और merit goods को खुद provide कर दें. Price controls, minimum, maximum price controls. You have regulations from the government. There are so many, all sorts of policies that can be talked about over here. I think we've done a reasonably good job, good diagrams. Mostly, it's almost like a 13 level का answer so far. ठीक है. Um, Last part, from the evaluation point of view, obviously I've talked about two policies. I want to talk about the problems of these two policies. So now our evaluation starts. Please, whenever you start your evaluation, so your answer should always start with like in evaluation. Okay, so something like in evaluation. Okay, government intervention may not always. Remember, we said we have to make a counter argument that agar the whole answer analysis was about how it corrects the market failure, you have to do a counter how it may not always correct market failure effectively. Okay. So, for example, हमने subsidy की बात की है, तो let's deal with that. While a subsidy can raise consumption of merit goods, government face the challenge, because subsidies are कहाँ से रही है? Challenge of calculating the exact size of सब्सिडी, कितनी सब्सिडी देनी चाहिए ताकि जो शॉर्टफॉल है अम, वो कवर हो जाए. उसके लिए so face the challenge of calculating the exact size of subsidy because it is difficult to measure the size of external benefit. अब मैं और डॉक्टर्स, हम दोनों ने, एक ने पैसे लिए, एक ने वैक्सीनेशन लगा दी, अब कितने लोग प्रोटेक्ट हो गए मेरी इस डिसीजन से, इसको किस तरीके से हम क्वांटिफाई करेंगे? इट इज ऑलमोस्ट नियर इम्पॉसिबल. जब हमने डैम बनाया था एंड वी सेड डैम इज गोइंग टू सेव पीपल्स लाइव्स, So how much value should we put on people's life? That's a difficult thing to come up with in monetary terms, right? So over or under estimating the subsidy may lead to continued inefficiency. अगर आपने ज्यादा सब्सिडी दे दी तो वो भी प्रॉब्लम है वेस्टफुल के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से, और अगर आपने कम दी है तो वो भी प्रॉब्लम है बिकॉज इट्स नॉट डूइंग इनफ. इसको आप कहते हैं फिस्कल वेस्टफुल fiscal spending, because remember there's an opportunity cost. That money could have been used somewhere else, but now that money is getting spent over here. So in addition, subsidies are opportunity cost heavy, meaning the funds used could have been allocated to alternative public goods and वगैरह वगैरह, right? So that is one counter argument. You should get about 3 marks for counter arguing the problem of subsidy, which is about the measurement, which is about how you could have used this money elsewhere. And the last thing that you have to do, it's a must thing that you do for evaluation purposes, that you have to talk about the counter argument of the taxation. So, last but not the least, the effectiveness of indirect tax depends on the accuracy of estimating the external cost के pollution कितनी हो रही है वगैरह. So again, if the tax is set too low, then overconsumption is likely to happen. People, will continue to buy these goods क्योंकि it's not enough fine. जैसे हमारे यहाँ होता है कुछ चीजों के अंदर अगर आप enough tax नहीं लगा देते हैं, high prices इतनी नहीं करते हैं, तो people feel that it's not a reasonably high fine. If I'm doing millions की corruption and a few lakh I have to pay for it, then it's not bad, right? So, but on the other hand, if it's set too high, then output may fall below the efficient. तो सोशल वेलफेयर का लेवल है, सो बिलो द एफिशिएंट लेवल. रिमेंबर दीज टैक्सेस, ये जो इनडायरेक्ट टैक्सेस लगे हैं, वी नीड टू रिमेंबर अबाउट देम दैट इनडायरेक्ट टैक्सेस जो हैं वो रिग्रेसिव होते हैं. रिमेंबर रिग्रेसिव टेंड्स टू बी रिग्रेसिव. मतलब ये पुअर इनकम के ऊपर ज्यादा लग रहा है. आपने सिगरेट्स पे टैक्स लगाया लेकिन उसका एक डिस्प्रोपोर्शनेट इफेक्ट आ रहा है on low income people. Rich is still, paying the price for those cigarettes, they can afford it. लेकिन जो lower income है वो ज्यादा इससे hurt हो रहे हैं. Also, you can also write about the effectiveness of these taxes through the PED is also relevant. Okay. The PD is also relevant. I think my hand's a bit on the tired side, so therefore I'm writing. लेकिन you can always write. Usually ये जो harmful goods होते हैं या goods होते हैं, इनकी production जो होती है वो inelastic होती है, so it's not gonna make much of a difference. तो इस तरह से you can have all the other counter arguments also. So final. Once you're done with this, now let me just tell you the conclusion of this whole. So you're gonna write something like in conclusion. Um, Government policies can theoretically reduce the welfare loss associated with market failure, but their success depends on accurate information, administrative capacity of the government to be able to calculate these, cost effectiveness, and incentives at the end of the day. Does the government have the incentive to reduce? So, in many cases, intervention reduces but does not eliminate the inefficiency. Okay? Some policies may be better suited to certain types of goods or externalities than other. So, therefore, while governments can correct market failure, the extent of success varies case by case. So something like a end conclusion like that, but this is what you are expected and should be capable of writing in your examination.